welcome back to the show. You know, if you haven't voted, I don't know, can you even go places and still vote anymore? Or do you have to fill out the ballot? I guess if you can find a place that's open, you might have a couple hours. Welcome back to Brashonomics. I'm Ben Brashen, and we are lucky enough to have Stephen Macdonald join us, real estate broker with John L. Scott. And well, first, welcome, Stephen. How are you?
I'm great, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm really good. So, you know, there is an election tonight.
Right.
You've heard of that.
I have.
Covers every commercial break, everything you do. But you know, when it comes to real estate, you've been in the real estate business for a long time. You've seen elections come and go. We talked about in the monologue and how people put off decisions because they're not real sure which way the election's going to go.
Right.
Do you see the election really impacting real estate?
Yeah, it definitely has a factor on it. One interesting thing, Ben, I was just looking this morning when I was coming in here. What do you think the White House is worth as a real estate, talking about real estate?
What is it worth? Like on Zillow?
Yeah, what do you think of that?
I don't know. 50 million.
50 million? I was thinking like 100 million. So I looked online, and it's actually, Zillow says it's $284 million.
So it's just about the same as Bill Gates' house.
Something like that. Isn't that crazy? Who can put a value on the White House?
$284 million.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
But, you know, I think real estate, there's a macro perspective nationally, what we talked about at the beginning. The government has a role in real estate, right? So that's a big deal. You know, definitely look at the mortgage rates, making it affordable, that kind of stuff. But in 2008, the big deal was when the government stepped in and took control of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, right? So they came in. So really about 90%, as you know, Ben, of the loans right now are backed by government, which keeps the interest rates low. So I think the big issue is, what's the new president going to do? Is he going to back that policy? Is he going to back away? What's going to happen? So there's an influence on that. But I think today, the thing I wanted to talk about is the concept of that real estate is really local. Don't you think so, Ben? It's a local thing. There's definitely macro influences nationally, but locally, I think there's some strong influences, like in Bellevue, east side here, that are bigger than the national issues.
Oh, I would agree. You know, the interest rates are certainly a national perspective.
Right.
And, you know, from an interest rate perspective, you brought that up.
Right.
It's pretty tough to say that either president would allow rates to drastically go up.
Right.
Because, well, the housing market hasn't really come back. And if that's the lagging piece of the economy, you can't kill it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, when it comes down to local, that's,
Right.
I think, what makes some of these areas we're so lucky.
Right.
Because we have this national financing perspective, which keeps rates low.
Right.
But locally,
Yeah.
things are good.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I was even looking at, you know, nationally they say figures like 25% of homes are underwater financially. So if you have a loan worth $100,000 and the value is less than that, like 75,000, there's 25% of the homes in America, of homeowners in America, are 25% underground. So nationally we have some big issues and we have some traction to get through that. But I think locally, I've been looking at, you know, the population growth, for example, like in Bellevue. The population has grown substantially. And who's coming into this area, right? We're talking in the break there that we have like Southeast Asians, like in Somerset, which is a healthy neighborhood close to the studio here. 40% of the population are from Southeast Asia. And that's just happened over the last, 10 to 15 years. So this area is attracting quality people because of jobs and because of good education.
So you really have this influx of people coming into an area because of, I've talked about it before, like these housing fundamentals.
Right.
You have good jobs that make money.
Right.
People want a nice place to live, and so it brings up these type of areas.
Yeah, and I think that's that whole concept of supply and demand. If the supply is low and people want to live here, there must be opportunities, right? And it definitely will. We can't be naive enough to say the government's not going to influence that. Obviously, that's a big deal with interest rates and affordability ratios and stuff. But I see right now there's some really interesting things happening. Like, for example, if you looked at the growth in King County this year, it's about 5% year on year. So last year to today, at the end of September.
The growth of what?
The growth of the value of the property. So if a house is worth $500,000, it's gone up at an average of 5%. Okay,
or
so
25,000 for those of you guys
25,000
keeping track at home.
I wasn't going to do that because I'm not good at math on it here. So the big thing is if you look at that and you say, okay, that's great, that's a really generic, healthy figure, 5%, nice, healthy growth. But there's some areas like Bellevue, Maidenbower, Bridle Trails. If you look at these figures, they've actually increased 9 to 12%. Which is amazing, right? So if we see generically there's 5%, but in some pockets it's 12%. If you go to Snoqualmie further out, it's maybe 2, 3, 4%. Issaquah's 5%. So what I see is, first of all, if we're close in, there's already been a healthy growth. But out with the area, slightly further out, there's still potential for growth. And the other thing I was looking at is it from potential ideas and good way to make or create opportunities. If we see growth in the area of 5% in a low price point, like Bridle Trails, Clyde Hill, etc., but the high price point still hasn't caught up with that. But there seems a steady growth. And a lot of these, looking at these deals right now, there's a high percentage are paying cash for deals. Isn't that exciting?
I mean, that's amazing, too, because it does take a little bit of that financing piece out of it.
Right.
In some of these you talk about Clyde Hill, I mean, Medina,
Right.
I mean, these are not your average areas.
Right.
Wasn't Clyde Hill just voted like the second best suburb in the country, or
I think so. It's way up there.
Something like that. But, you start looking at those factors. I mean, the amount of cash that's coming in is incredible.
Right. Yeah. No, I've seen cash even from China, coming in through Vancouver. We just see strong amounts of money coming in, and it's not leaving, right? So if we look at the national concept, the macro issue, but looking locally. So I don't want to say today that, the election definitely has an influence on real estate, but locally I think there's opportunities that are bigger than the circumstances, just like what you quoted earlier.
Yeah, we're here with Stephen Macdonald, real estate broker with John L. Scott, who's won awards for the last 15 years. So, Stephen, you talk about the opportunities and the ability for people to maybe rise above the noise of the election and the ads, which are tough to get away from. You got to turn your radio off, I suppose, or your TV, or
defriend your people on Facebook, right?
And stop driving under major overpasses on the freeway.
Yeah.
But if you can shut off some of that stuff and focus on what's important to you as maybe a home buyer or home seller, that's where you're going to find those opportunities.
I think so. Even if you look, as you say, rising above all the noise, people want to live here. Like Bellevue is in the top 25 safest places in the nation right now. Isn't that amazing? Top 25 in the nation. So we have good education. We have great jobs. It's a safe place to live. People want to live here. I'm not mentioning the weather right now, being a sales guy, But the idea is that people are attracted into this area. So we see this growth, this steady, healthy growth. It's not crazy growth, but heady growth, 5, 6, 7%. So there's areas that have already popped into the 9 to 12% growth areas. But there's other areas close, and there's pockets that are still 3 to 5%, which I would say are opportunities.
So you're talking about these pockets that haven't risen as much as maybe the all-encompassing city.
Right, exactly. So it's like the idea, if you have like a cup of water, there's certain areas you pour the water into the cup and some areas start to fill up. So the best areas fill first, they're the lowest areas. So the best affordability and the most desirable, your Clyde Hills, Medina, downtown Bellevue, they've popped the fastest. Maidenbower, they've gone up. So there's other areas now beginning to catch up with that. Renton, Newcastle's already gone. It's like 9 to 12% growth in Newcastle. So there's areas, even the smaller, less attractive, most not so mainline names like Medina and Clyde Hill have already popped. So my suggestion is that above all the chatter of the real estate, locally here we're actually very healthy.
And we only have about a minute left before we have to go to break. But when you start looking at finding these areas, I mean, how does somebody dissect what is an area that maybe hasn't gone up as much, maybe has the opportunity for growth within, I guess, even the neighborhoods of larger areas?
I think they need to contact their local real estate agent. It's very, very local right now. But what I'm seeing is the factor that money's cheap, as we know, and the affordability is still here. But the population is growing and the rental market's tightening up. So people need to live, supply and demand. So we're just seeing a constant pressure on the supply, which ultimately will then push the margins up in a healthy way. So it's not like some crazy 2007 trend that's shooting up here, but no, it's very healthy. So there's opportunities within that. I think if you can go to Zillow and some of these mainline websites and genetically look online, you'll see pockets that you start to increase substantially.
Yeah, and it's good to see too, because, well, I guess if you're looking at your own house and it's gone up, it's always fun.
Right.
And I believe it was Zillow who put out a big study about if house prices start rising, just the confidence, that consumer confidence starts to come back.
Right.
And, we haven't talked a lot about consumer confidence for a while, partly because, well, it's not as dismal as it was a year ago. But, if you're in one of those areas and you see your neighbor's houses going up, I think it brings some of that confidence back.
It's absolutely. So you look at these three factors: affordability. If you look at the purchase price and you looked at the interest rates, but I think the general feeling. I was in a few different transactions that people were really jumpy because of the election, and the reality is that they were above these circumstances. A lot of them were cash deals.
Well, I think there is some truth to that. I mean, it's not like you're above the election per se, but certainly you can put yourself in a position to still make decisions even with the election going on. You can't have all these outside influences, especially if you want to find a nice place to live.
Right.
Because you do have to, well, at some point in time, you got to put a roof over your head, right?
That's
Stephen,
right.
thanks so much for joining us. We do have to go to break. Again, Stephen Macdonald with John L. Scott. When we come back, we're going to get some more real estate perspective from another agent who sure has been through a couple elections, and will share his expertise, David Bell from RE/MAX. We'll be right back after this break.